Scott Clayton from Zurich knows burglaries are an all too common occurrence.
That's what insurance is there for, to compensate people who've been the victims of these crimes.
So when one of Zurich's customers became a target, they put a call in.
After work, when we came home, I just find like some windows on the floor. Then I go in the house. They took as much as they can, taking all my wife's jewelry, taking my like bags, my wife's bags, you know, the shaving machine. They've been taking that as well. They go into the living room. They've been taking the iPad. Even they've been taking some of my shirts, some of my wife's like shirts, like good brand one like Prada and others. Scarf. Whatever they can, they just took it.
Okay, and then what did you do after that?
Oh, we just called the police straight away.
The caller had done all the right things and had his crime reference number. So now Zurich would talk him through the next steps.
At that point, we will obviously ask for all the details of what happened and what had been stolen.
In terms of the items then that have been taken, have you got a list? Do you know what's been taken?
Yes, we have sent the list to police already.
Okay, brilliant. Can you run through that list with me now? Yeah.
Gucci watch, Paul Swarovski earring,
Okay.
Marc Jacobs watch, Rotary watch,
Yep.
okay, Michael Kors necklace and watch,
Yep.
iPad mini, 2
iPad.
Prada coat,
Times 2 Prada coat.
Louis Vuitton handbag, Porsche car key,
Yep.
Tommy Hilfiger coat.
The total of the items that he was saying were stolen was in the region of £14,000, so it's quite a significant burglary.
The burglars had expensive tastes.
When we're looking at designer items, we would normally expect somebody to be able to provide purchase receipts and even tell us where and when they bought them to validate a claim.
But what if he didn't have them?
A break-in where possessions have been stolen, that can take many forms. So there could be purchase receipts, photographs, really anything that demonstrates that you actually own the items that you're claiming for. The policyholder sent nearly 40 photographs and 2 photographs of 2 designer jackets that he said were worth £750 each.
Surely this was enough to support the claim.
We'll validate and check all documents and photographs that are sent to us. And photographs in particular have a digital footprint behind them. It's called metadata. So we'll always look at the metadata to find out whether it corroborates with what's been told in terms of the time and date these photographs were taken.
The burglary occurred on the 6th of February, so when Scott got the metadata report through, something stood out.
Strangely, in this case, they were actually taken after the burglary. They were taken on the same day as we had asked for these photographs, so clearly these weren't of items that were stolen during that break-in. Quite difficult to take photographs of items that had been stolen 10 days ago, well, unless you know the thief.
Well, the claimant appeared to be committing daylight robbery, but Zurich's investigator wanted to see if there was a plausible explanation.
When the policyholder met with our investigator, he said that all the photographs that he provided to support his claim were taken at various stages after these items had been purchased. So, not surprisingly, he didn't admit that 2 of the photographs had been taken after the burglary. We challenged the claimant on these particular photographs, and after some deliberation said that the photographs that he had taken were actually of his brother's jackets, which happened to be identical to the ones that he had stolen. So he maintained that it was still a genuine claim, and these were his brother's jackets and not the ones that were stolen. So we asked for his brother details so that we could go and speak to him about the purchase of these jackets. Unfortunately, there was no responses to any of our contact, so we had to base our decision based on what we had.
And it wasn't going to be pretty.
This individual was added to the insurance fraud register. It's not the kind of register you want to be on, as it will affect your future insurance.
So not only did he get labelled, this would also be a cautionary tale.
Because of the exaggeration and therefore the fraud, this claim was declined. We didn't pay anything. This claim was worth £14,000. We had no proof that the burglary didn't occur, so the policyholder would have received something in settlement. But as a result of his dishonesty, we pay nothing. So any genuine items that he lost in this burglary, he wasn't compensated for, and he ended up with nothing.
More and more companies are offering telematics insurance, and Simon Rule from Insure the Box knows all about the benefits.
We blend insurance and technology by using a telematic box which is fitted to every policyholder's car. This enables us to understand how and where the vehicle is being used, and in the event of an accident, we do receive an alert. And our protocol is that we then try and outbound a call to the driver and get the help that they need.
And for one of Insure the Box's policyholders, the need for help arose at 2 a.m. one morning when they were involved in an unfortunate incident.
The details that were given to us by our policyholder was that he had been travelling along a road and that a vehicle in front had come to an abrupt stop and he hadn't been able to stop on time, and therefore he hit the rear of the car in front.
It sounded like a typical rear-end shunt, so with little concern, Insure the Box looked into the paperwork.
This particular claim was made up of a number of elements. First of all, you had the damage to 2 vehicles. There were 4 personal injury claims, and there was a claim also for credit hire, which is where a vehicle is supplied to the third party in order to maintain their mobility. The potential cost of all of these claims combined was going to be in excess of £50,000.
It was at this point Insure the Box accessed the information from the telematics box.
When we examined the data from the telematic box, initially some of that data matched. For example, it told us the location that this event had taken place, and that matched. The fact that there had been an accident, that also matched.
It looked like the box's data was backing up the driver, but as Insure the Box investigated further, something came up.
When our policyholder reported the incident, he only told us of 1 impact. The claims that we received from the other parties also only showed 1 impact. But our data showed that there had been 2 impacts, 7 seconds apart. We recognised that something here wasn't quite right.
The onboard digital detective had sniffed out a discrepancy, and now forensic engineers would look at both cars.
So for our policyholder, the BMW car, we obviously undertook our own inspection. And the same then also occurred for the driver of the Mercedes car. When we then received the report from the engineer of the Mercedes car, that contained a written report as well as photographs. And it was when our engineers were examining the pictures, they recognised that the level of damage that was caused to the Mercedes-Benz were inconsistent with a single impact.
So all of the pieces of the jigsaw were coming together.
We were building up a picture which enabled us to actually tell the parties involved that we were going to reject the claim and not make a payment on it.
And with that, it should have been case closed. But there was a blip.
The parties then decided that they wanted to press forward and make a legal case of this in order to force us to make a payment and honour all the claims that had been made.
It looked like £50,000 was something they couldn't walk away from. With the case going before a judge, Insure the Box collated the data to provide more evidence.
The beauty of the telematic box is that it's already recorded all the journeys that our policyholder has made since the inception of the policy, and that enabled us to put further pieces of this puzzle together.
And it revealed quite a story.
The driver of the Mercedes-Benz was not the owner of that particular car. And the data that we retrieved from the BMW car actually showed to us that our policyholder had visited the real owner of the Mercedes-Benz 19 times prior to the event taking place. One of those actually being the day before the accident actually took place. They clearly knew each other. They weren't just a chance meeting in having an accident.
And as luck would have it, there was one final piece of evidence.
The owner of the mobile phone that was actually used to make the call to report the claim in the first place. It transpired it didn't belong to the driver of the BMW car. It actually belonged to a mutual friend of the driver of the BMW and the wife of the owner of the Mercedes-Benz.
So after a lengthy investigation, it was the day of the trial, and the claimants would finally get their day in court.
Interestingly, our own policyholder does not turn up for the case. However, his two passengers do turn up, as does the driver of the Mercedes-Benz and his passenger. After making an initial appearance in court, even the two passengers in the BMW car failed to attend court any further after that. The judge in his summary actually wrote that he felt that their lack of attendance in court was further evidence that the claim they were making was clearly fraudulent.
So the driver of the BMW had been found out. But what about the second driver that was involved?
He said of the Mercedes-Benz driver that he was prepared to obfuscate, prevaricate and lie as it actually suited him. And as such, he's a grossly unreliable witness. And he threw all claims made by all the other parties out of court. So this was a huge win for Insure the Box.
QBE sets up insurance cover for employers all over the world, whether it's a multi-million-pound company or a local business, and deals with 12,500 claims a month.
We were notified of an incident that one of our insurance employees had been involved in. The claimant's employment was as a kitchen fitter, so it was quite a physical, manual task. He had climbed into a skip to recover a kitchen door, and as he was climbing back out, he fell 10 to 12 feet from the skip. He'd sustained a fractured wrist and may have injured his back also, which caused him some difficulties as a kitchen fitter.
Now, any injury can force you off work for a while, but if you have a job that requires muscle power, it's a double whammy.
The claimant was claiming for a fractured spine and also for lost earnings that he'd sustained during his period of absence, which was ongoing.
A fall, a fractured spine, loss of earnings, it was all sounding very serious. But something wasn't quite right. The employer had told QBE about the accident within a fortnight, but the claimant seemed in less of a hurry.
We first received notification of a formal claim for the incident 7 months after the event.
So the time delay aroused suspicions, and there was something else.
We had some concerns when the claim came in because we'd been notified early on that there hadn't been any major injuries. So to be told that he'd suffered a fractured spine was a bit of a surprise.
The claimant had received 7 months sick pay from his employer.
After that, because it didn't look like he was going to return to work anytime soon, he was moved on to statutory sick pay.
So it was at that point he came knocking on QBE's door for compensation.
Eventually, the claim amounted to £150,000.
It was time for QBE to look into the claim in a little bit more detail. It called up his medical report, which stated that he'd had a stable wedge fracture to his spine and was so badly impeded he needed to use a walking stick. But when QBE undertook some social profiling, it found something quite surprising.
It brought up some news items that indicated he'd actually been involved in a high-speed chase with the police, which also involved drugs being thrown from the window.
But the claimant wasn't the driver, so could have just been sitting in the passenger seat.
He'd actually tried to escape on foot and jump over a hedge to hide from the police, apparently while crippled with pain.
Yes, not quite the actions of someone with a fractured spine. Even more shocking, a further search brought up clips which were time and date stamped when the claimant was supposedly laid up and immobile.
Such as videos of him punching a punch bag as hard as he could without any apparent skill, and also doing press-ups with his son on his back.
Booyakasha indeed. So for QBE to have absolute clarity,
we carried out a number of periods of surveillance on the claimant. The footage actually shows the claimant going about his daily life without any apparent problems. It shows somebody who's physically very fit and able to undertake some quite strenuous activities.
And if that wasn't enough, what QBE discovered next was the claimant pumping iron.
On considering the evidence, it didn't seem that he could have any potential injury that was long-lasting as a result of the initial injury. The only conclusion we could draw was that he'd actually tried to defraud us. Upon the receipt of the evidence, the claimant said that he would like to discontinue his case, which we refused because we wanted to have the hearing so we could get a finding against him.
His plan to abandon the claim had failed, and he would now be held to account.
The case went to trial in April 2018, and the claimant was questioned on a number of issues, which included him attending a benefits assessment in a wheelchair. His benefits payments were around £50,000. They also raised the issue of the social media profile evidence and the surveillance evidence. During the trial, the claimant denied any sort of regular gym attendance. He just put his muscular physique down to good genetics. He was also asked about 10 other personal injury claims that he'd made in the last 10 years. We don't know how much money he made from the other personal injury claims.
Probably enough for his gym membership, you would think.
The result of the trial was that the judge said he'd been dishonest about his presentation of the claim. He'd been dishonest throughout, and he'd also tried to defraud the Department of Work and Pensions, and as a result we managed to get a fundamental dishonesty finding.
And that kind of ruling would cost him dearly.
The consequences of a fundamental dishonesty ruling are that we're entitled to claim our costs from him, and his entire claim is struck out. So he now owes us £35,000.
Lee Ingram from First Group had a claim land on his desk which involved an unfortunate cyclist.
We received a claim from a gentleman who'd alleged that he'd been knocked off his bike by one of our buses striking his rear wheel. This man was alleging that as he'd been cycling along a road, the bus had got a little bit too close to him and he tried to go up the curb and the bus had clipped his rear wheel, causing him to fall off his bike. The bus hits man falls off, hits the floor. He sustains some injuries to his neck, radiating to his shoulder, and some minor back pains. Some sort of 4 days later, he'd gone to the hospital and needed some treatment. On face value, we had no reason to believe that this was anything other than a genuine claim. These things do occasionally happen. Buses and bikes can come into conflict sometimes, and they're sharing quite small spaces. In this case, they were both going underneath a tunnel. The claim submitted to us was for the personal injury sustained, so it would have been worth around about £4,500.
It was all sounding like a really nasty accident. Fortunately, First Group buses are fitted with CCTV cameras, so Lee knew he would have irrefutable evidence. But first stop was to check in with the bus driver.
Our driver's version of the circumstances didn't really give us any cause for concern. They seemed slightly different, but the fact is he didn't know who'd hit who.
There was just one thing the driver mentioned that gave Lee cause for concern.
He'd said that in the conversation after the collision, there was no allegation that there'd been any injuries, and the guy seemed very reluctant to actually give his personal details, which is a little bit odd. In light of the slight inconsistencies and the worry as to whether there was an injury, we needed to find some sort of evidence that would corroborate what the cyclist was saying.
So First Group reviewed all the cameras.
What we're expecting to see from the CCTV is just a coming together of the bike and the bus at some stage. Now, the interesting thing about CCTV footage is that sometimes the sun can cause some sort of strange effects, and in this one you've got this big ball of light towards the back of the bus. It's quite dramatic. You see it as if from the mists of time this cyclist appears. I was quite surprised by what I saw. He comes along the path, weaving in and out of pedestrians. He has to go right to miss a chap with his dog. As he tries to cut back in left, the bike's got other ideas. It carries on straight, sliding into a pole. The bike flips to the right. He dumps the bike, does a fantastic, I'm really impressed with the level of his roll. Straight over, doesn't stop, pops up on his feet as if to say, nothing to see here, I meant that. Yeah, it's a really good piece of work.
But bad for the claim.
The CCTV actually shows something completely different to what we've been told.
So maybe it was just the angle. Or maybe not.
The main thing to notice is that he's never actually on the road at any time. How this bus is supposed to have clipped him is anyone's guess. He just loses it, hits a pole, and has to dump the bike, doing a great roll in the process. I was impressed.
And there was a wider audience.
I thought, at what stage did this guy decide that he was going to lie to make a claim up? Or whether he did it just because he just tanked his bike in front of a group of people. It's difficult to tell sometimes.
Having seen what happened, the driver stops and checks that the cyclist is okay.
What you do see is him shaking hands with the driver. They have a conversation. I can't lip read what he's saying. There's no sound on the CCTV, but I'd like to think he was sort of saying, did you see that pole? Where did that come from? In light of what we'd actually seen on the footage, we didn't waste any time in writing to the guy, telling him that we weren't going to be making him any offers. I'm not really surprised that this gentleman didn't even bother replying to us. What would be surprising is if he didn't have another accident at some stage in the future. This is a potentially serious incident where he could have easily gone under the bus.
So not only was the claimant's riding reckless, he may not have been the only one to take a fall.
If there wasn't any CCTV, the likelihood is we may well have had to pay this claim and possibly take an action against the driver. When you watch this footage, it's clear that this bloke has got no real moral values. He's quite happy to lie to make a quick buck.
LMG had a case that came in with more sides to it than the dazzlers it normally deals with. And it was Kevin Newton who looked into it.
It was a claim for the loss of 3 diamond rings. We were appointed by insurers to validate the claim, and to help us we were given a pre-loss valuation. The potential value of the claim could have been up to £250,000 based on the specific information recorded on the valuation.
So big bucks were at stake, but from the outset Kevin knew something wasn't ringing true.
With the valuation that we received, there was certain information, certainly the values that had been assessed were completely incorrect. They were far too low.
Ring number 1, 3-carat diamond solitaire ring, valued at £9,500. LMG's valuation, £75,000.
Based on the quoted diamond carat weight, just far too low.
Ring number 2, white gold diamond eternity ring, 7.3 carats, valued at £12,300. LMG's valuation, £35,000. Ring number 3, white gold, 4.7 carat diamond solitaire ring, valued at £12,500. LMG's valuation, wait for it, £110,000. Making a total difference of just under £186,000.
There were specific details of the diamonds, the grades, the colour and clarity of the stones and carat weight, and they just didn't make sense.
So what did Kevin conclude?
The only reason the values might have been incorrect is if the grades weren't correct, weren't accurate, or the person who prepared the document didn't really know what they were doing.
To get clarity, Kevin wanted to speak to the person who valued them, and this is when things got interesting.
Well, we tried to contact the jeweller who'd prepared them, but realised that they'd actually closed down. This particular jeweller was no longer in business.
But this didn't mean that they hadn't prepared the paperwork, so the search continued.
Using social media, we managed to locate a manager who had worked at the shop for more than 25 years. We contacted him at his new business, and we discussed the paperwork and sent him a copy for his thoughts.
Would he validate the paperwork, and therefore the claim, or would it reveal more flaws?
We'd obviously told him about the values, which I thought were too low, but we asked him to comment on the overall presentation of the document. The manager came back with a number of discrepancies, and in his opinion, it wasn't quite right. And he said that it wasn't the type of document they'd used at that time. It should have been a handwritten document. But in fact, this had been printed. It would say shipped to, which you wouldn't get on a valuation, but it also said valuation and receipt, instead of being one or the other. Name of the assistant who was on the valuation didn't actually work at that store when the document was prepared.
And if that wasn't enough...
There was an issue with the company logo. That type of logo they wouldn't have used at that particular time, as they weren't computerised for another 2 years. And there was no doubt that it was a fraudulent document.
LMG's next steps were simple.
We sent off a report detailing our concerns to the insurance company.
So instead of a quick payout, the claim was looked into more thoroughly.
The investigation did take just over a year, but the outcome was that the claim was declined in full.
The unthinkable happened at a railway depot. It was Sunday evening, August the 17th, 2014.
Sir, what happened?
I don't know. I came into work and my coworker, he's on the ground bleeding all over the place.
Hold on, one
But
second.
I think he might be dead.
He's not breathing?
No, he's not responding to me at all.
Okay, I'm trying to write to medically. Don't hang up. Hold on. It's gonna be okay.
No, I don't think he's alive.
Fire department, what's the address of your emergency?
It's 1582.
There appeared to have been a violent robbery, leaving railroad worker Robert Limone fatally shot. Mr. Limone had a wife, Sabrina, and 2 children. Kern County Sheriff's Office investigated. CCTV clearly showed a man entering the back of the building around 6 p.m. By 6:40 p.m, Mr. Limone had been shot in the head and chest.
It's gonna be okay.
No, I don't think he's alive.
Well, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get you guys some help.
There was a lone shoe track at the back of the building and inside a ransacked office. But the fact that Robert Limone's wallet hadn't been taken led detectives to believe there was something staged about the so-called robbery. With no strong leads, a phone call from one of Robert's friends changed everything. He told them that Robert's wife Sabrina was involved with a man called Jonathan Hearn. Delving into phone records, the police found telltale text messages proving the two were romantically involved. This was enough evidence to wiretap their phones, and detectives began to feed them false information to see how the pair would react.
I just got a text message from Detective Meyer and he asked me to call him, so I'm going to.
Okay.
And
pray.
Okay, I just wanted you to be praying. I'm going to pray and...
God,
okay?
please help us. God, please help us to be wise. Help Sabrina to have the right words.
Sabrina called Detective Meyer, who told her they needed to make a public appeal and were going to show the CCTV footage again.
Sabrina, how are you?
I'm okay.
We're kind of running into a dead-end spot right now. So I'm hoping that by them re-releasing the video, it'll spark some secret witness tips or something like that.
There's no information at all.
Honestly, I don't have anything, but I think we're kind of getting into a dead end.
Having been fed this false information, Sabrina immediately called Jonathan.
They don't have anything, and they're re-releasing the same video. I'm really sorry.
Did he ask you any questions?
No questions at all. He just said they're at a dead end.
It was starting to look like Sabrina had been part of the whole elaborate plan, so detectives tried one more ruse.
I'm not sure what's going on, but Detective Meyer called me, and he said that he got a secret witness, that a tall white male was leaving on a motorcycle around the time of Robert's murder and said that it's someone that knows Rob by the name of John.
How would they have known that I drive a motorcycle?
All of a sudden, is there a new video? Like how did this all of a sudden just come up?
Detectives had heard enough. On the 18th of November 2014, both Jonathan and Sabrina were arrested. Sabrina was forced to admit to the affair.
Talk about when you guys first met.
When we first met, it started, he was wearing a firefighter shirt, and I know other firemen, so I started talking, you know, and then he came in there all the time.
This was supported by picture after picture of Sabrina on Jonathan Hearn's mobile. Detectives showed Sabrina a photo of the suspect leaving after the shooting.
So this is
3 minutes after the murder occurred. Oh, that's Jonathan driving away from the scene.
And when we put the picture of Jonathan on his bike down in front of you, you don't need to sit and stare at it for 15 minutes. You knew exactly who it was. And you should have said it. It's Jonathan, and it's Jonathan's bike. Everybody else did. He's leaving right after he kills him.
And this is 1 hour later.
Did you ask him what he was doing in that gas station? Halfway to where your husband was murdered?
A search of Jonathan's place gave police material evidence against him.
On August, I think it was the 8th, Jonathan, he bought these clothes he was wearing. We found the receipt.
Detectives also found Jonathan's gun, a homemade silencer, and receipts for ammunition purchased on the morning of the murder.
So how does Jonathan know he's there that day?
I had told him.
And that day he gets murdered, and you don't figure that out. I don't think you're that dumb, Sabrina. I really don't.
That's my fault.
Absolutely, because this whole thing stunk to me from day one.
They also had theories about why, and so pushed Sabrina to admit involvement.
What's the prize? You, correct? I think you're flat in the middle of this murder. I think you set your husband up and had him killed by Jonathan so you two could be together.
No.
And I can tell you that's not going to happen, ever. You are not going to be together. He's going to end up going to prison for the rest of his life. And I've got some serious doubts about you. Okay?
Okay.
Let's get you to jail.
But with no confession, Sabrina walked free, placing everything on Jonathan's shoulders. Eventually, he pleaded guilty and was jailed whilst he awaited sentencing. Absence should make the heart grow fonder, but for Jonathan Hearn, 2 years behind bars left him feeling decidedly cold. In exchange for a plea deal, he agreed to testify against Sabrina. On January 6, 2017, Sabrina Limone was arrested again, charged and put on trial, with Jonathan's testimony being absolutely critical. It transpired that the murder of Robert had started as a joke, but by the beginning of 2014 had become dangerously sinister. They planned to poison him. Jonathan purchased arsenic, worked out ratios, and even tried it on a neighbourhood dog, successfully. But worried their phone records would give them away, they abandoned poisoning for shooting him at the railway depot. Photos taken on Jonathan's phone 4 months before the murder showed Robert's workplace. And evidence found in Sabrina's home revealed that far from being a crime of passion, it had been much more calculated. Survivor benefits. As Robert was killed at work, a settlement figure may have been offered. And Jonathan's laptop provided a clue to another motive. Searches about life insurance payouts. In fact, 2 months after Robert's murder, Sabrina had received a payment of $300,000. And the court found out from Jonathan's testimony it could have been very different. On the 17th of August 2014, Jonathan Hearn arrived to find Robert was out on Highway 58. Just as he was about to abandon the plan, Robert returned.
How do you think Robert felt? And this guy's got a gun in his hand. Like, what was going through his mind? Was his heart racing? He's scared. He's thinking about his kids, his wife. This guy's trying to murder him. For what? So he could have his life. This guy wanted Robert's life.
In exchange for his testimony, Jonathan Hearn was sentenced to 25 years and 4 months. Sabrina Limon was found guilty of 4 of 6 charges, including first-degree murder, and was sentenced to 25 years to life.